Welcome to Dementia Dialogue. In this episode, we return to our theme of arts and dementia and listen in on a conversation between Loiselle and Chris Wynn. Chris is a documentary filmmaker whose father developed dementia at the age of 57.
We have Chris Wynn with us. This is a part of the Arts and Dementia podcast series. Now, Chris, we've known each other for many years.
Yes.
We've worked together in a number of capacities. So you have been in the television industry for many, many years. And the reason we met and connected is you created a couple documentaries, and it started with your father's diagnosis of young onset dementia. So today I wanted to really talk about the portrayal of dementia in the media. And as a filmmaker, as somebody who works in television, how do you think TV is portrayed, or that dementia is portrayed in the media? And can you just talk a little bit about what you've done and what you've created?
Sure. Thanks again for having me, Lisa. Happy to be here. I created 2 feature documentaries for television for both TV Ontario and the Knowledge Network. First film, called Forgetful Not Forgotten, was about my father and his struggles and my family's struggles with early onset dementia, early onset Alzheimer's. The second film I made was called Much Too Young, with also on the same subject, but focusing more on younger caregivers. So focusing on 4 different families with kids under the age of 30, sometimes even as young as 13, dealing with a parent with, again, early onset. So both those films, first of all, it's not something I ever planned to do. It wasn't like I'd been working in television in Toronto back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and I was working as an assistant editor, and I'd worked on films and worked on music videos and on sets. And I had done photography before that. So it was definitely a passion of mine for sure. But my first instinct was actually just to help. The first film that I made, Forgetful Not Forgotten, about my dad, I didn't set out to make that film. I was actually just there helping my mother as a caregiver. So I actually moved in with them for 2 years and gave up my job in Toronto and moved into the Laurentians, Quebec, into the cottage, and lived with them and helped my mother take care of him. And I had a video camera, and so it was a passion of mine to always videotape anything. So I just started filming, and it turned into that film. So again, it wasn't something I really set out to do. It's just something that I wanted to do. It kind of gave me something to do while I was caregiving as well. And then after a while, I realized I had all this footage and I should really do something with it. And that film actually came together after he had passed away. I had put that film together. And I had seen, so going back to when he was diagnosed and everything, I didn't really know much about the disease. My family didn't know much. And so in the media, I found, again, this is the late 90s, early 2000s, something would come on at the 6 o'clock news about Alzheimer's, and we'd all tune in. Oh, what are they talking about? What are they talking about? But the problem with 6 o'clock news, and it's the same today, is those stories are like 2 minutes, not even. They just touch on stuff. So basically, the stories they were talking about weren't really relevant to what we were going through. And, there was, when it came to TV or feature films, there really wasn't much at all out there. I think there was a few Hollywood films where maybe one of the bit parts or one of the secondary characters, like a grandmother, might have, memory loss or something. And sometimes it was just played out as a joke. Until something like a movie like The Notebook came along, which people loved, and it's not a bad movie. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying that's not really. It doesn't portray Alzheimer's in every aspect of it, and I actually don't know if you can make a movie that portrays Alzheimer's in every aspect of it. So there really wasn't much on TV or movies at all back then, and that's not where we looked for information anyways. We did whatever the other family did and went to the Alzheimer's Society and went to support groups and met with other families, and that's what really helped a lot was other families, talking to other families that were at different stages to see, you know, what they were going through and what maybe you'd see coming up in the future. So that's kind of how we as a family sort of did our research, or not research, but learned about the disease. But really, you also learn about the disease just by living through it. So me filming my dad on a daily basis, you know, I learned a lot about, I learned more about how my mother was a caregiver than anything. And seeing that, and then I think putting that film together really helped myself and my family. And I think it helped actually a lot of people, because there was a lot of there's other documentaries, great ones made about Alzheimer's dementia as well. And I think it's really hard to portray like a fictional, an actor trying to portray someone with dementia and Alzheimer's, because you really don't know what they're thinking. So I think for film and television, it was really the documentary stuff that was the most appealing. And that's why I decided to make my dad.
Yeah.
And, you know, it went on to help a lot, because what happened was, and again, I never expected to make the film, and I didn't expect to what happened afterwards. And that's how you and I met, but was basically the film came out in 2009 on TVO, and it got amazing reception. But then what happened was, a few months later, different chapters of the Alzheimer's Society asked me if I would come and show the film and talk about it. So this started happening probably in 2010, that I would travel. It started off with like one chapter of the Alzheimer's Society where I would go, and you know, there's maybe an audience of 20 or 30 people, families, caregivers, care workers, anybody. We'd show the film, and then I'd speak afterwards. And I'd never spoken in front of audiences as well, so it was all kind of new to me. And then different chapters started calling me up, and for like a 2.5 to 3 year period, I just traveled around, not full time because I had a young family at the time, but I did a lot of traveling, mainly through Ontario. Like I think I went to almost every chapter of the Alzheimer's Society in Ontario, even up to Northern Timmins and Sudbury and Sault Ste. Marie. Doing the same thing, showing the film and then talking about it afterwards. So I think it had a really good reception. Like it really hit people hard. I even went down to Boston. I traveled around BC, the Alzheimer's Society of British Columbia. I did a little tour with them in Winnipeg, and obviously in around Quebec and Montreal. I was doing that as well. So it was interesting to see how many people it had touched. And I think, again, it was because it was so raw and so real that people really connected with it. And during this time is because, again, Forgetful Not Forgotten was a film that I had to make, where I felt like I wanted to make something else. Like there was a bunch of stuff I didn't get to touch on in that film. And in that film, I didn't really get to touch so much. I'm in the film and I narrate it and everything, but I don't think I really touched on how much it changed my life, like being a young caregiver and changing my life around. And so during all those tours and meeting with other families, there was quite a few times where I met most families were, you know, dealing with someone in their 80s or their 70s or a parent. But there was the rare time I had a young family come up to me with young kids, like teenagers and stuff like that. And they were dealing with, you know, a parent or a spouse or something. And so I thought, you know, again, another way to tell a different story is to tell it from a younger kid's perspective, to show that perspective, but also to possibly get a younger demographic interested in watching it. If they're watching a film, whether it touched them or not, whether they had Alzheimer's in their family or not, I thought they'd be more interested in watching kids their own age in a film like that. So that's how I came up with the idea for Much Too Young, which again took me quite a few years to even get off the ground. I think it was about 4 years of just talking to families throughout Ontario and Toronto and Montreal. And it wasn't until I got a couple families that were actually interested, and I did some basic filming of myself by myself, of just going to have dinner with them and stuff. And then it kind of took off after that. And that film, Much Too Young, which also played on TVO in 2017, it focuses on 4 families, all dealing with a younger parent. And that was really interesting as well to put that together, because it wasn't just me. I did have a crew and stuff. And The guys that I was working with, the cinematographer and the sound guy, because it was just three of us, they didn't know anything about Alzheimer's. And it was amazing to see their journey, the crew, how they went from, I think we filmed over a year and a half or 2 years, how they, from day one, how they went in and thought about someone with Alzheimer's until, day 40, how comfortable they were around people with the disease now was amazing to watch as well. It's almost like another documentary in itself there.
Yeah.
So putting those two, and that film, I think I did I didn't do as much touring with that as I did with Forgetful Not Forgotten. I did do some presentations and stuff like that, which was good. That helped a lot as well, because again, it was we kept these both documentaries very raw, meaning like we didn't set up a lot. We kind of just let the cameras roll and really wanted to capture people, like the whole fly on the wall thing, like just watching a family or watching an individual or a caregiver with the disease. We just kind of let it play out, meaning like we just filmed and filmed and filmed, and then went into the editing and thought, what was the most, how should we put this film together and stuff like that. Where other stuff, fictional films, it is very scripted. It is very, again, when Still Alice came out with Julianne Moore, I thought that was really good. She did a really good job, and I think that's probably one of the best performances. And I know there's been other films. I think the main thing lately is in the last 5 years, there's just a lot more out there now than there was in the late 90s and early 2000s, meaning there's a lot more in the media. Again, they still tell 2-minute stories at 6 o'clock news, but there's a lot more on television, and there's a lot more feature films, and obviously a lot more books and stuff. So I just think it's out there a lot more, which is great, because I've always said that even if you watch one of my films, you're not going to get the whole story, because
Right.
how can I cover the whole spectrum of dementia or Alzheimer's, in an hour and 20 minutes or an hour and a half? And I think it's impossible to do it. And I don't think you should do it, because it's just too much information. So what I usually tell to people is, watch more than one thing or two things if you really want to. The best thing is still to talk to other families, talk to real families, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But if you're watching a documentary or watching a fictional film on Alzheimer's, just be aware that this is just one story.
Yeah.
And there's so many others out there, and you want to learn as much as you can about the disease, and you should watch as many things as possible.
Oftentimes you'll see in the media, a person that's 85 years old, in the end stages, very confused. And so for the general public, that can cause some real issues when it comes to the stigma that's associated with dementia. That's, the one thing I always remember in my mind is the commercials about the gentleman that keeps going to the store and buying lemons.
Yeah.
And that's the general public is seeing. So for someone like you who, you see all of this stuff, but you actually go and make an effort to, research and find out and speak to other people. A lot of us are just looking at what's on television, the commercials, and I think it causes a lot of misconceptions about dementia. And so did you ever think of this when you were creating your films? Did you think that, it would help to change people's perspective of what it is? I know it's only one perspective, but for me, seeing both of these films multiple times, it's not the typical story, right? When you as a young carer, again, when we see people living with dementia and their care partners, their family members, they're usually older. So you were giving a different perspective, and something that I think was really important.
Yeah, I think that was definitely for sure in creating Much Too Young. And when I was even, putting Forgetful Not Forgotten together, it did come to me a lot, because again, exactly what you just said, that a lot of people had just seen or just knew, like we didn't even know as a family that my dad was diagnosed at 57, right? We had no idea that someone could be diagnosed that young.
Right.
Because all we heard in the media was that you can get it in your late 70s or 80s. And again, at that point, the only, documentaries or films I had seen had been the same sort of thing on National Film Board or CBC or whatever. Was always, a lovely couple in their late 70s or early 80s. Maybe one of them is in a home already or something like that. Those are the stories. And that's what, you're right, that's exactly what the general media, a general population saw. So definitely, I think when I was putting Forgetful Not Forgotten together, the film about my dad, that's exactly what I was thinking, that because the same story had been told over and over and over and over, then let's look at it from a different perspective. Because if you're just telling the same story over and over, then you're just, you're not getting through to people, or people aren't, or they're just going to change the channel and they're going to say, oh yeah, I saw a film about this the other night, so why would I watch this one? In fact, I think there was, when we were trying to get Forgetful Not Forgotten funded, we went to a bunch of different broadcasters and funders, and they kind of said the same thing. Oh, I've seen this before. I've seen a film like this before. And I was like, you have? And they're like, oh yeah, somebody with, Parkinson's or cancer or something. So, it's not right for us right now. So, which was kind of upsetting at that time, because I'm thinking it's not the same, but it didn't fit their bill. But anyways, so definitely looking at it from a different perspective was for sure, for the second film, Much Too Young, actually saying that this 13-year-old is a Alzheimer's caregiver. In fact, that's what our poster was. It was a picture of one of the girls from the film, Aurelia, who was from Montreal, and she was only 13 years old. And we put her front and center. And the caption was, this is an Alzheimer's caregiver. Or, this is the face of an Alzheimer's caregiver. And it wasn't a picture of someone in their 70s or 80s. It was a 13-year-old girl. So we thought that's a way to really capture people right away. Because if they see that, they're like, how can this young 13-year-old girl be a caregiving for someone? And she was caregiving for her dad, who was 52. Yeah. So again, it was just trying to look at it from a different perspective, look at it from a younger perspective as well, because I still know it's not, young Alzheimer's and early onset or whatever they call it now. I still know it's not, still most people still get it in their 70s and 80s, but there's a lot more people getting it now that are younger. So it was definitely, that idea was to try to look at it from a different angle, to try to tell a different story. So it's not the same story over and over.
Do you think things have changed? So from when you first made Forgetful Not Forgotten, and seeing the portrayal of people living with dementia and their family members who are care partners, do you think it's changed at all in the media, the way people are portrayed?
What hasn't changed is the way mainstream media, journalists, if they haven't been through it or they don't know anything about it, they're still going to ask the same questions. And it's always about the heartache and the forgetfulness, and the question, when did your dad not know you were his son? It's those same questions that keep coming up until you are interviewed, like you're interviewing me now, because you know it. I can tell when someone interviews me that's been through it or is going through it or knows about it or has researched it, because they have the questions are different. Where I've been on, TV and radio and print as well, where it is just a journalist and they're getting their research from where it's been for years and years and years. So it is about the heartache and the hardship and, how tough it is. And I'm not saying it's not tough. Of course, we all know how tough this disease is, but there are other aspects of it that people don't even know about because it's not portrayed in the media. Like there can be joy, there can be, great parts of it. There can be discovery, there can be still learning, there can be the one word I always come back to is acceptance, right? Accepting these people for who they are and that they're still a person, and that was my dad and it's still my dad, or accept him for who he is at that moment, right. Even if he has the disease, that's something hard for a family to do, especially when you're going through it. But those kind of things never come up in interviews.
So where do you think things should go from here? So, there's definitely a huge difference between documentary film and your, typical Hollywood. So I just watched The Father with Anthony Hopkins, and it was different, I think, than some of the other Hollywood movies that I've seen about dementia, even compared to Still Alice, because what it does, it how I felt watching it, I felt very confused, very anxious, And I think that was kind of the whole point of the story, is to make people feel like have that affective change. And I think it did. It was successful in doing that. And I've never seen a Hollywood film kind of try to do that, make you feel kind of confused. And I think just in interviewing people living with dementia for so many years, and family, care partners, I think it did a good job from what I know. But again, I don't know, I'm thinking more of a ethical and moral perspective on, should we be doing this kind of, should Hollywood continue to make movies that are specific to different diseases or different conditions, where they have no idea what the person is thinking or feeling, compared to a documentary film when people, it's more of a lived experience. And I get conflicted about that. And I think I feel overprotective of, people who have gone through this, and how it kind of minimizes that experience. And it angers me, to be quite honest, that, they make films and they make fun of people living with dementia. And I don't know, what are your thoughts about that? Should people stop making kind of these Hollywood films about these different conditions? And
No, I don't think they should stop. I think, again, I can see the evolution, again, how they're making more. And I haven't seen, The Father, and there's even another one. Anyways, I don't remember the name of it either way. But so I think that's basically, when it comes down to it, is, again, it all depends on who's watching this and what are they getting from it. And that's for any film or any television show at all, right? Who's the audience? So, and I agree with you, and I know what you mean. And a lot of families get upset when they say, well, that's not how, Alzheimer's is and dementia is. I think they're doing a better job researching. I don't think these big Hollywood films just say, obviously, and I know someone like Anthony Hopkins, he's method acting, like he's doing his research the best he can. Now, he can't get into someone with Alzheimer's and dementia's head, but he also can't get into, he played Richard Nixon, right? Can't get into his head either. So he's doing the best job that he can. However, it's not like these Hollywood films are saying, this is Alzheimer's, this is dementia, when they put it out there, right? I don't even think they're using the word Alzheimer's and dementia, which I think is actually a really good thing. If they're just putting a film out there saying it's a father and daughter story, right? I'll even say it myself, that my last film, Much Too Young, people said, I heard you made another film about Alzheimer's dementia. I'm always saying, yes, it's got Alzheimer's dementia in it, but it's really a story about families and stories about, connections and relationships and stuff like that. So I think there's still a stigma when you're talking about stigma, and I've said this for years, there's still stigma behind the word Alzheimer's dementia. I often thought the Alzheimer's Society should change their name, or because if you advertise something with the word Alzheimer's dementia, people people still don't watch the films I made. People still don't I'm not going to that Alzheimer's dementia. It's not it doesn't affect me. Why would I go to that? So I think it's a good thing if these Hollywood films don't emphasize that. And then you go in and you start watching it and you realize afterwards, oh, the father has memory loss or something. So again, I think it has to do with the viewer, meaning like, if you're going to sit down and think this is what Alzheimer's is, then you've already lost, you shouldn't be doing that. You should just be watching it as a movie, whether you like it or not, and then, watch another movie or a documentary. And like I said, watch a bunch of different things and then kind of piece it together yourself and say, I think they did a good job here. I don't think they did a good job there. But a lot of people, it's just, they're just trying to get entertained or something. So it depends. Also, I don't know. I don't know, dementia and Alzheimer's used to just be called senile, right?
Yeah.
So there used to be, and there was a movie, it's like Christmas Vacation with Chevy Chase.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the movie, his aunt and uncle show up, and she definitely has some kind of dementia or memory loss. And she's just a joke, hilarious, right? She's just, I haven't seen anything like that in years.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of stopped doing that. Maybe there is, I've not, I haven't seen it. So I think they're doing a better job than they were, but they're still, I don't think the filmmakers or Anthony Hopkins are like, even again, Forgetful Not Forgotten, I don't even explain what Alzheimer's dementia is. And I don't do it in Much Too Young either, because people can just research that, or they might know what it is. I don't go into what happens in the brain. I don't go into any of that stuff, because they are just stories. So if a film is trying to say this is Alzheimer's and dementia, then it better do a pretty goddamn good job, because it shouldn't be advertising that. And again, it's up to the viewer when they're watching it to say, okay, I know there's a person with Alzheimer's dementia in this, and I have a family member with it, but it's not what my mother or father are going through. It's, is it similar? I don't know. Maybe there's some other aspects of it. Just keep an open mind to it, but understand that they're not trying to put it all in the umbrella, right? Like this is everything together, and you're going to finish this movie and you're going to know what the disease is like, because I think it's impossible. And I don't think filmmakers are trying to do that anyways. So I hear what you're saying though. Like I used to get offended watching some things. And I think the first time I watched The Notebook, because somebody had said to me, oh, I watched The Notebook. So I know, not that I know what Alzheimer's is like, but I've seen it because I've seen The Notebook. Somebody's actually said that to me years ago. And that's kind of what it's like. No, you can't just see one film or something and think you know what it's like, because maybe they didn't do a great job. So I think it's still important that they're making films. I think it's important, like someone like Anthony Hopkins is playing. Didn't he? I think he won the Oscar last year, didn't he, for something? Anyways,
did he?
I can't remember. Maybe, yeah, he did. He won for Best Actor. And Julianne Moore won Best Actress when she was in Still Alice too. So, and if they're getting up on stage and saying something, which I don't know if they did or not, but I think anything helps to get it, other than the 6 o'clock news, the 2 minutes at 6 o'clock. I think that helps a lot more. So I think they should continue doing it. I just think they need to do their research, the filmmakers and the actors, and more than that, just say, not even say, but just don't say that this is a film about Alzheimer's dementia. Just, put it out there and let people, decide on their own.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really important statement, kind of to wrap this all up, is that, these films and it's portrayed in the media, but you got to take it with a grain of salt, right? It really is not the end all and be all of what dementia is. And unfortunately, I think the unfortunate thing is that people still see that, right? Like they still see it as, oh, okay, now I know what dementia is. Now I know what that experience is like.
Only way you're ever going to know is by living through it,
right.
Or having a really close neighbor or someone in the family that you spend time with, not just having an aunt and uncle that you heard has dementia and you see them once every 6 months. That's not it. And so even if it's in your family, even you still need to, be around them and spend time with them, and you should, because it takes a whole family to support each other. But that's the only really way you're gonna know, not even all the aspects. I still don't even know all the aspects. People say, "Oh, Chris, you must be an expert because you made 2 films with Alzheimer's dementia." I'm like, I still don't know. I only know. I don't even know if my dad had Alzheimer's dementia. He had something. I know what he got to be like, and the families that I hung out with a lot, and all the families that I've met over the years through you and through other people. There's so many different stories. And the interesting thing is about those stories is when I talked before about doing all those presentations, at the end I would do a presentation. I would just talk about making the film, why I made the film, other things about my dad. And then I do a Q&A, and a lot of people in the audience were going through it, and they would just start telling me their story, right? They wouldn't even have a question. They would just start talking to me. So, people want to, because they feel alone and isolated, and this is a whole different conversation. But those stories, that's what I encourage people to do. I said, tell your story. You might not want to, you might not think you should, whether it's through a journal or a blog or a podcast or filming it or whatever. I just knew that it helped because it touches a lot more people and it brings people more together. So as hard as it can be. And I still encourage people to do that, to tell their own story, and I totally encourage these films, whether they're Hollywood or television or whatever, to just, keep telling those stories, because when I was going through it as a family, there was nothing. There was really nothing.
Telling stories is what this podcast is all about. Stories that help us understand ourselves and stories that help us understand each other. Thanks to Chris for sharing his own personal experience as a son and then as the creator of these two important Canadian films. Links to these films can be found in our show note accompanying this episode. Chris's observations about dementia in the media are insightful about how the media often has a one-sided view of dementia and fails to see the joy and love that abides. This episode concludes our series on the arts and dementia. There are close relationships between this series and some of our other episodes. For example, Chris's films share a lot on young onset dementia, and we have a series that is running concurrently. Art and life mirror each other. Thanks to Loiselle for curating and hosting this series. Together, the 8 episodes represent a broad range of artistry that interpret dementia, offer new ways of communicating, and enable us to find new ways of being with each other. Some of our artists are living with dementia. Some came to dementia through their art, and others came through close relationships. All are advocates for change and see art as one means of achieving it. In mid-May, we released our 3rd Francophone episode with Claire, talking about her poetry and art and how they help her adapt to living with Parkinson's. Even if you do not understand French, you can see her art on the note accompanying the episode. If you want to have our episodes delivered to your inbox, write to us at dementia.dialogue@lakeheadu.ca. Thanks to the Centre for Research on Aging and Health at Lakehead University, our institutional partner, and to the Public Health Agency of Canada for its financial support. We are ending this episode and our series on the arts and dementia with a clip from a song session convened by the Toronto Recollective, a project that brings folks living with dementia together with people who enjoy singing with others. These days they meet together on Zoom, but this clip was recorded just before COVID set in. Our show note has more information about the project and the tools they offer to others to help start their own group. The pianist for this recording is a 95-year-old woman who lives with dementia, and the musicians are all volunteers. Enjoy. Thanks for listening. My name is David Harvey.